This program is part of the Infinite Potato Alliance. Visit us at infinitepotato.com.
I'm Shane Thomas and this is Analysing Doctor Who. I'm joined today by Jenn Allen and Ken Deep, and coming this May we will be getting the first episode of a new series of Doctor Who, which is why our episode today is going to be a top 5, specifically a top 5 of Doctor Who opening episodes, as in, to use a US parlance, season premieres. So we'll be in our top 5 on those, and there is going to be, because we know Doctor Who existed before 2005, but there is going to be, particularly for me, a very modern bias. If you have additional thoughts beyond that on what we'll be talking about or anything else Doctor Who based, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. That's analysing spelt with an S. However, before we get to that, we do have to address some news that broke not long after we recorded our latest pod, and that's the news that it appears that Millie Gibson's time as the companion could be brief, even briefer than we initially thought at the time. Now we're going to bear in mind first that a lot of the news that's come out may not be news. There is a difference between news and rumours, and there's been a whole lot of supposition, speculation, ranging from apparent stories about Gibson being really difficult to work with on set, and that she's fallen out with Russell T Davies, and that she's fallen out with everyone on set, and this was Christopher, like working with Christopher Eccleston all over again, and that her role has been cut back because of this. But what I think we feel confident we can say is that Millie Gibson will be the companion for Doctor Who in 2024. And things have been filmed. We know for a fact things have been filmed that we believe will be scenes for 2025, that series. But we mentioned this in the last pod. She did an interview with Fabric magazine. She said, oh yeah, she's basically looking for work, trying to do auditions, seemingly mainly in America. And there is a heavily rumoured new companion, Verada Setu, who's probably best known for her work in Andor. She's in season 1 of Andor. And we know for a fact that Setu has been doing scenes on set where she very much appears to be very companion-coded, scenes with Ncuti. But we don't know this for definite. And part of the reason why all this stuff is flying around is that nothing has been made official. There's been no comment from the BBC, nothing from Disney, nothing from RTD. He hasn't taken a social media break. He's still happily posting on Instagram, but nothing to do with this at all. And nothing fills a void like speculation and assumptions. And I'm aware that we ourselves are contributing to that, but that obviously set Doctor Who's social media ablaze over the past few weeks. So Ken, if I come to you first, your just general thoughts on this as well.
My general thoughts are that it's not surprising. I don't know why this is suddenly controversial, being that they're shooting so far ahead. Was it just our assumption that she was going to stay on forever? We haven't heard anything from any official sources, so for all we know, she only agreed to do 1 year, or she got another gig, or she said, I can do this amount of time. There's just so much. Everyone runs things up the flagpole with these rumors, and okay, yeah, so maybe she's leaving. But until we hear anything, why are we making stuff up? And by the way, she's the Rani, because that always seems to be the rumor.
Actually, something I did want to mention about staying forever. But first, Jen, if I bring you in.
I was not surprised, considering some other companions that have been brief in the past, but especially since they're putting a lot of effort to have this big mystery about the character. I'm kind of curious what is really going on. I mean, obviously, again, like you said, speculation, but behind the scenes stuff does happen with certain actors. None will be named in this podcast at this time. But I'm not surprised either, really.
Well, one important thing to state, because obviously we're dealing with the world of art, so obviously everything's subjective, but every now and then you can find very specific numbers and facts to back up analysis. And so you both mentioned, should we have been that surprised? This isn't unprecedented. So I looked at all the companions since the show's come back. And since 2005, when Doctor returned, we've had 11 what you probably call full-time companions, 11 people who've travelled semi-regularly or regularly with the Doctor. Rose, Captain Jack, I'm including Captain Jack in that he's debatable, Martha, Donna, Amy, Rory, Clara, Bill, Graham, Ryan, and Yaz. And then I looked at how long actually they did travel with the Doctor in the show. So one of them was there for already half a series. 4 were there for 1 series. 3 of them were there for 2. 2 were there for 2.5, and 1 of them was there for 3. So if we say that Millie Gibson as Ruby is only going to be there for 1 series, that kind of is the most common outcome for companions in the modern era of the show. 4 of them have been 1 series, and then as a regular companion, gone. And if it's 1.5, I mean, no one's ever done 1.5, but that I think is the current, what we can gather, the current thing, that she'll be featured in 2025, but maybe not as much, and her story will be written out for the time being. But to your earlier point, Ken, the idea of this being a mass controversy, it's like, well, this has happened plenty of times before, without this level of a kind of and it has been very online, which is it's just an online thing, but an online firestorm. And this is probably what I think this is maybe most illustrative of, is the size of Doctor Who, partly because of just fandom is so online and it's a lot more intense than it used to be, because it's easy for us to all voice our opinions, but also because of what Doctor Who is trying to be. It's trying to be a bigger show, I think, globally than it maybe has ever been before. And what comes with that is increased media scrutiny, because what we're talking about here is kind of a picnic compared to what happens if you sign up to work in Marvel, or you sign up to work in Star Wars, or maybe even like Star Trek. That's kind of par for the course in those worlds. Doctor Who maybe hasn't had that same pressure and as many eyeballs on it, and as many people who might not watch the show are still kind of, it's more in their orbit now compared to how things were in the past. So with this, listen, we don't know. Usually with these kind of rumours, there's maybe a little bit of truth. It's only one person's perspective, point of view, or some exaggerations. I mean, we do know, if we go back to facts, Ncuti Gatwa has made a point of his social media of being very supportive of Millie Gibson almost as soon as that news broke. I think he maybe made a couple of posts, a couple of Insta stories that was trying to make it clear to be like, I have no problem with Millie, plenty of love for her, so there's no problem here. There might not be a problem with anyone, but even if there is, you also have to remember, and I remember we mentioned this when she was cast, we all said, oh, she's quite young, isn't she? And she's still very young. And this might be also a potential fallout of putting someone who's very clearly very talented, but also very young, in a position of immense professional pressure. I don't want to act like it's, there are more courses, more high pressurized jobs. She's not doing she's not a surgeon or anything. But when you're that young and you're still growing as a person, you may not be used to the level of attention, the level of expectations that are put on you at that age.
Something that Star Wars and Doctor Who do have in common is a lot of the times they cast actors that are not as well known, and they become famous because of the property.
They start making shows. They definitely.
Yeah. The only exceptions I can really think of is like Peter Capaldi was already pretty big before he got cast. And then the guy who played Walsh was pretty big. Other than that, I mean, a lot of these folks, they just either have been partially known due to other properties like guest appearances and yada, 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 or they were just starting out like Matt Smith. So Tennant had a couple of things, but it wasn't a lot at that time. I mean, he did Broadchurch after, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Broadchurch came after, yeah.
He got famous because of Who, and then he got more famous because of other stuff he was in, like Broadchurch. But in a lot of cases, they usually cast unknown people, and that's kind of part of the charm, I think.
It's one of the things we might have a better idea of in a few years' time. We see how Doctor Who does, particularly with whatever Disney involvement, that it's maybe going through a transition as far as maybe becoming a grown-up show in terms of we want to be a big deal globally now. And that's fine, but that does, and there are obviously lots of benefits to it, and most people would want that, but there are potential negatives. It's like a person becoming famous. There's lots of great things that will happen for a person in their life, but there's also negatives, and there are certain changes that a person has to make to their life, and maybe certain changes that Doctor Who has to make in terms of not the basics of the story. Doctor Who's still Doctor. You still got to basically write entertaining 45 minutes each week. But in terms of what happens behind the scenes, of how you make the show, of how you prepare people to be on the show, maybe a little bit different. To re-emphasize, we are purely speculating. We don't know exactly what's happened. We don't know if anything's happened. But I did see one thing online where someone made a point. I think part of the reason why it's become a story is because there's the idea of Millie Gibson leaving, and she's barely started for us. And Ken, this comes back to your very valid point about, because they film the show not like in terms of the US, like the turnaround's not as quick. They write 2 years ahead, they film a year ahead. So like right now, as we're talking in 2024, Russell T Davies is writing for 2026. And they're filming for 2025. So whatever happens with Ruby Sunday, it's kind of happened and has been done. And hopefully they're very happy with what they've done and the work they've all done. But because we have barely seen any of it, I mean, ironically for a time travel show, we're all out of time. We're acting like nothing's been done yet. And it's like, no, they've been working. It wasn't like she's been there for 2 weeks and was like, I don't like it here, I want to go. But that's what it might feel like to some fans because we've seen her in one episode.
It's very quickly on the heels of being introduced to her that we find out she's leaving. But Doctor Who fandom has this habit. Whenever they cast a new Doctor, it takes about 7 seconds before the media in the UK go, so who's going to replace this Doctor? I'm like, well, we just got this one. They're always trying to get the jump on something that's down the road. I think it's overblown, and I think it's as overblown as, if you remember, around Christmas, we also had everyone was pulling their hair out of their head about ratings, like as if that's a thing anymore. Oh, this many millions of people watched it, and it was down here, and it was up here, and it's like no one cares, honestly.
I think like our overall, like I'm definitely not celebrating. I said in the last podcast I've taken to Ruby immediately, so I'll be very sad to see her go. But how about we judge what we see as the show, and then we can judge the news when news breaks. And maybe that's the one slightly frustrating thing. I think this is where the Christopher Eccleston comparisons come in, because this is what happened similarly with Christopher Eccleston, where, and you both remember better than me, but what was it, after a couple of episodes of him on TV, it was announced he was leaving?
Yeah, it was really fast.
During World War III, Aliens of London, somewhere in there.
Okay, so that's episode, I think, 4 and 5.
If I remember that correctly, and it's been a long time. But it was that quick.
And people thought, oh, is he going to die? Oh, my God.
They followed that template. We probably won't get an announcement until June, where so the factor of social media comes in, because the reaction is instant. Everyone wants to know right now and can't wait. And I do think, some fans are going to have to wait, even though it does make it slightly irritating of just lots of unfounded and unverified rumours about what's happening in Doctor Who, which we may have to put up with for a few more months. But like when we have official news, I'm sure we'll talk about it again. But given that it was the main story on kind of Doctor Who base since we last recorded, we weren't going to just not mention it. But that's not our focus today. So we will start with our actual topic today, our top 5s. And Jen, I will come to you first. So if we come to your number 5, which is actually my number 2, what episode is your number 5 from?
My number 5 is Partners in Crime.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. I'm the Doctor.
And I'm Donna. Partners in crime. And evidently of worlds, judging by your sonic technology.
Oh yes, I've still got your sonic pen. Nice. I like it. Sleek. Kind of sleep.
Oh, seriously.
And if you were to sign your real name, that would be...
Matron Ophelia of the 5 straight and class of nursery fleet. Intergalactic class.
A wet nurse. Using humans as surrogates.
The second introduction of Donna as a companion, and a lot of people, when she first was announced, were like, oh God, Donna. But when she came back, it was like she had been completely rewritten, and she wasn't the naggy character that she was in the Christmas episode. And people actually fell in love with her over the course of the series she was in. And I thought it was brilliant because of the fact they kind of had turned her character arc and made her more tolerable. And she became one of my favorite companions of the Tennant era. Just overall, it was a great reintroduction of Donna and just putting her into the fold, and how she just melded so well with Tennant's Doctor that they were just the greatest mates and going on adventures. And I just thought it was so great to see her come back and get the love she rightfully deserved.
I wasn't mad on the Runaway Bride in general. I didn't really like Catherine Tate's performance in that. I mean, it felt like she showed up, read the script, and did what she could. With this, I imagined more time to think about the character, the arc. In a way, if you rewatch The Runaway Bride, having watched this, The Runaway Bride becomes a little bit better because who this person is makes a bit more sense. This is one of these things that come up in The Writer's Tale, the Russell T Davies kind of book of correspondence, that Catherine Tate and Donna was not originally the plan. It was a wonderful, I don't know if happy accident's the right word, but as often happens with Doctor Who, things that weren't the plan become the plan and actually become a great plan, where Russell T Davies was, Martha is now gone, he was going to bring a new companion in, planned to write a new companion, and he really began to think about this companion and said, oh, I know she's called this, and she does this, and he was almost quite excited to write her, and then the opportunity for Catherine Tate to rejoin the show came along, and he was like, alright, fuck this new character, Catherine Tate's back. And I don't know if he was trying to convince himself that the new companion was going to be great. Maybe it would have been. We'll never know. But once he had Donna back, he was very eager to write this character and build. This really does build on what we saw from her in The Runaway Bride. I think this episode is maybe the closest Doctor Who come to ever doing like straight comedy. There's aspects of this that you get in a sitcom, as far as how the story's written, how it's put together. There's aspects of like the first half of the episode that, even though it's not a rom-com, it copies a lot of the tropes of a rom-com, because the Doctor and Donna keep missing each other. And we, as the audience, are willing them to meet, and we know that they've got to meet at some point, but they keep just missing each other, and that's the kind of stuff you get in a rom-com, usually, with the potential couple. There's little random things that stop them meeting. You're just like, you want fate to get out of the way so that these two can be together. This obviously isn't romantic, it's more calm than rom, but it definitely fits those tenets. And the episode itself, in many ways, is kind of an episode about second chances. Russell T Davies getting a second chance with this episode, Donna getting a second chance, choosing not to go with the Doctor and then regretting it. And we get those really good scenes of Donna, I think particularly with Wilfred, looking at the state of her life and thinking, I'd made the wrong choice, and if I had another chance, I'd make what I think would be the right choice. And that doesn't happen in Doctor Who, or sometimes in real life. You know, in real life, Donna's just left with regret forever, but in the world of Doctor Who, she can get another go to kind of travel with the Doctor and ultimately be more of the person that she would like to be. And definitely has one of, and maybe arguably the funniest scene in Doctor Who history, when the Doctor and Donna meet again. And
she's like in the window, and she's like, hey, it's me!
And it's all kind of mime. It's all mime. It's inspired because initially it's a couple of things, I mean, not said, mouthed, and then you realize it keeps going, and it becomes more funny and more entertaining. And I remember watching thinking, how long can they keep this going? And they kept it going for a while, and it never got boring. So it had a funny end, had a very funny end, because it's a moment of peril, meant to be peril, and it's high comedy / farce. The only scene I've seen from Doctor Who that I think is funnier is the one with like John Cleese looking at the TARDIS because he thinks it's a work of art, modern art, in a museum.
Oh yeah.
and this is like Tom Baker's era, and then he walks in the TARDIS and obviously flies away of it, and that is
right.
I think that's the funniest bit Doctor Who's ever done, but this runs it very close. It's a legendary scene.
Both actors have incredible comic timing, and I think David Tennant kind of relishes the chance to show these guys great comic chops. Everyone knows Catherine Tate has great comic chops, but I think David Tennant kind of relishes the idea that, hey, I can get in on this as well.
They work together very well, and I think she's very good at bringing comedy out of him. In a weird way, she's good at having seen them be in a few things. Tennant is great at bringing drama and pathos out of Catherine Tate as an actor, and Tate is great at bringing comedy out of Tennant. I saw them on stage. I saw them do Much Ado About Nothing, and they play Beatrice and Benedict. They don't just work together when Doctor Who, they just work together great as people, two actors with tremendous chemistry. I think you could put them in anything together and they'd shine. But yes, I agree that Tennant's probably his most funniest as the Doctor when he's with Catherine Tate.
And what happens, I think, with Donna's character, similar to when Jamie joined the show way back in the 60s, Jamie McCrimmon was originally supposed to be just a one-off guest character. And Fraser Hines played the role a certain way, and then it was picked up as a companion, and he had a chance to reset the character a little bit. And even he says, in order for me to make the character last more than just a couple of weeks as a guest character, he had to work on the accent a little and how he carried himself and what the character was going to be. And I think that the same thing happened here. Donna was originally just this sort of one-off. We have a comedian joining the show for a Christmas special, and it was meant to be really over the top. And then maybe the chance to revisit the character, now you pull it back a little, because that onslaught of everything just being comedy will get tiresome. So she has a chance to reset the character, give the character some depth, which clearly happened, because you can see the outpouring of love over the character. You don't fall in love with the character like Donna unless there's depth to it, and you're moved emotionally.
And it really is the start of something really significant in not just modern Doctor Who history, but Doctor Who history, because I think as far as the modern companions go, I don't think anyone has a higher approval rating, high Q rating. I don't think anyone does in Donna.
Yeah, well, there's a reason why they picked them for the 60th anniversary specials, why they put that pair back together.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
I don't know if Donna's going to be on like number one on the list of people's companions. She'll be on some, but I think she'll be on a lot of people's top fives, which is a good idea for an episode in the future. Obviously, you'll always find extremes at either end with anything, but Donna doesn't tend to be at the negative end. I hear very few negative sentiments about her, and Partners in Crime was definitely the starting point of that. So, Ken, if we come to your number 5, what episode is your number 5 from?
Mine is Spyfall, and it's Spyfall Part 1.
Boy from Bromsgrove, Council State Local Comprehensive, now with his own collection of planes and motorbikes. And a private airport.
We couldn't afford to go when I was a kid. Now flying is one of my big hobbies. We even got my own personal plane. I fly my mates around the world and insult over the intercom during a flight.
Anytime you put the Doctor in a tuxedo, you have me right there. And they have just great fun in this episode, playing with the whole spy motif, and it's a little bit over the top, and we have great guest characters. It's a really strong vehicle for the 13th Doctor. And then, of course, anytime you have a mystery as to what's happening, I'm always hooked by a mystery. I think the audience is as well. And, Chris Chibnall's stories, they vary from super interesting to not so developed. And so the idea that this story hooks you in very early, makes you go along for the ride. Anytime there's a cliffhanger on Doctor Who, that's always a great thing, and we have a great one in this story.
We did speak about this episode quite a bit when we did our top 5 twists episode. Unsurprisingly, this did make the top 5 list on that because of how it ends, and that's definitely part of the genuinely shocking appeal of this episode. One bit I would like to actually add to this, this isn't on my 5. Maybe the best joke Chibnall gave Joe and his Doctor was when they're in the casino and they're playing, I think, 21, but the Doctor thinks they're playing Snap.
Card. Snap! Is that not the game?
Great joke, brilliantly delivered. I thought it was a solid episode with an ending that makes you go, oh god, can next week arrive right now? And which is generally what you want when it's a two-parter. The whole point of writing a two-part anything is that number 1 ends in a way that makes you desperate to see part 2.
And we also had Lenny Henry as our guest star in this, and that. So to me, anytime you have a chance, you have a chance to have that kind of caliber of cast between Sacha Dhawan and Lenny Henry. I mean, you just got just rock solid, adversaries, but a nice twist here. We're tricked out into thinking that our adversary is this sort of Elon Musk kind of character. And it's been the Master all along.
Right.
They didn't have to wear a rubber mask or anything. He was right in front of us the whole time.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously go back and listen to that episode if you haven't yet. But we did mention that on the Twist episode, is that part of the skill of that episode is that because we have an antagonist already in Lenny Henry's character, you're not looking for another one. And the Doctor's not looking for another one. So when the other one shows up and that other shoe drops, it drops hard. In a series I didn't especially like, this is one of the better episodes, and it does have, I think, an all-time Doctor Who twist. Okay, so we come to my number 5, and my number 5 is also Ken's number 2. My number 5 is the pilot.
Time doesn't pass. The passage of time is an illusion, and life is the magician. Because life only lets you see one day at a time. You remember being alive yesterday. You hope you're going to be alive tomorrow. So it feels like you're traveling one to the other, but nobody's moving anywhere. Movies don't really move. They're just pictures, lots of pictures. All of them still, none of them moving, just frozen moments. If you experience those pictures one after the other, then everything comes alive.
Am I on time?
That's a very big question.
Now, we mentioned earlier, before we got into this top 5, mentioned Millie Gibson and Ruby Sunday, and I mentioned in our last pod that Ruby is the first companion I've taken to immediately since Bill Potts, who is the new companion in the pilot. What I think is quite impressive, and this episode deserves quite a bit of credit for, is this had every excuse, this episode, to be forgettable and just disposable, and this episode easily could have been, because this was Moffat's final series, and the only reason it was his final series is because Chris Schindler wasn't ready to take over. If Doctor Who was going to still be on television, he was going to have to do the work to write it. He spoke about this briefly in his exit interview.
Is it like Reading on Death Row? Could it be? You could have been thinking, I'm going to write the end of days, I'm going to write the March scaffold, but I couldn't bear that idea. It's 14 brand new Doctor Who's. Let's treat it like the beginning. I called the first episode the pilot. Let's just start it all over again. And who gives a damn that I'm literally not even kids. So there's no story in that. Let's just make a grand new celebratory, invigorated beginning, rather than some sort of ghastly idea that I'm writing my last in my condemned cell.
He wrote this as if it was going to be someone's first Doctor Who episode. Another reason why it's interesting is that I imagine Ncuti's first proper episode, not his Christmas special, his first episode for his series, I imagine will have a similar energy to it. It's interesting watching the pilot, because even though I was well in the Doctor Who tank by this point, I didn't feel like the episode was too patronising in as much of... you didn't feel like explaining things that I'm like, I already know this because I'm familiar with Doctor Who. It struck a really good balance between for regular viewers, but I could see how if you've never watched Doctor Who, that you would be lost. You would kind of understand what's happening, and that's the great thing about a new companion. The new companion can be a new audience member, and they're figuring it out the way the audience is figuring it.
They brought in Bill, who was the first full lesbian companion, if I remember correctly. Because we
definitely out, yeah.
Well, out lesbian, yeah.
And that was kind of all the talk leading up to this, by the way. From Moffat, he really tried to talk it down. I think and I understand why he didn't want her to be defined just as that. But yes, a lot of the media talk was, the new Doctor Companions are lesbian, as if that was the only thing to Bill, and that was the only reason to watch.
They'd had queer characters before. She wasn't the first. She was just the first that was really talked about, I guess, besides Jack. But yeah, I liked Bill. I liked her coming on and bringing a little bit of new life to especially Capaldi's Doctor after Coleman had been there for what seemed like forever. Having Pearl Mackie come on as Bill was a breath of fresh air for a lot of people, I think.
This is one of my favorites. I love the Capaldi Doctor, so to me, that automatically, I have a leaning towards Capaldi stuff. But I really liked this as a reset. I thought that the introduction of Bill was a way better dynamic than the Clara 12 dynamic. I thought that having a sort of student-teacher relationship was way better suited for the Capaldi Doctor. An older man kind of take a student under his wing. And then, of course, making her an openly gay character that helped reduce a little bit of the creepy factor that you may have been feeling with the sort of Clara 12 thing. So I liked that. I thought that was a great idea. And the original title, the working title of this was The Girl with the Star in Her Eye. And I think that, like you said, there was a deliberate idea to kind of play with the audience a bit and call it the pilot, to steer perhaps someone on the streaming platform into, I'll watch this one, it must be the first one. But it is an excellent introduction because, as you said, Shane, it was like, even for people who already knew the answer, we went along for the ride, the bigger on the inside, first time in the TARDIS kind of thing. It was fun and playful.
Look at this place. It's like
spaceship.
Kitchen.
What?
Really posh kitchen. Metal with the doors run out of money.
What you are standing in is a technological marvel in science beyond magic. This is the gateway to everything that was. However, can
I use the toilet?
Hadn't?
I need the toilet.
It's done there. First flight, second left, past the Mac room.
I rate it so highly because I really think that, for me, this is when the Capaldi Doctor kicks in. And if you did use this as your first opportunity to watch the show, I find it to be a very good season, except for the sort of three-parter in the middle. I wish that the core of it was a little more of the great Moffat stuff, the sort of "Are you my mummy" kind of thing, and not the priests and all that. I that for me was just kind of the only lowlight of this season. But there's a ton of other good stuff, and if this was your first exposure to Doctor Who, you might get hooked. So that's my rationale for this being so high on the list.
You showed this like of a friend who's just started to get in because her wife is a fan, so now she's kind of been forced to at least give it a go, and she's very excited about Shooty. I don't know how we got talking. I think we got talking about Bill because me and my friend who's a fan, we both absolutely love Bill, and we were saying, you know what, maybe you might actually like Bill, because she wasn't really into watching the Capaldi stuff, and then we showed her that episode. And she wasn't like, oh, this is the greatest ever, but she was like, okay, no, this is quite good. I mentioned she has watched some more Capaldi, so in terms of the initial intention of the episode, it definitely worked on my friend. And I say a lot with stuff that I like, so much comes down to performances, and the performances are great. Pearl Mackie is a first timer, and she hadn't done that much work as well. She's early in her career. I think she's a revelation in this, and I totally agree with your point, Ken, that at this point, Capaldi is, to use like an African-American parlance, he is in his bag at this point. It's his third series now, it's his final one, and he has his character down. I rewatched it recently in preparation for this, and I'd forgotten how good he was. I remembered how good Pearl Mackie was. Matt Lucas does a very good job returning to the show now as almost as a helper / butler to the Doctor. But Capaldi has absolutely got the tone right. I always say it takes at least a year for the actor playing the Doctor to be fluent in the language of the Doctor, and Capaldi is absolutely fluent now. I understand why he left, and he said he wanted to go out while he was still enjoying it, but he's at such a high level now that you kind of think, like, if he wanted, and I don't begrudge him leaving, by the way, it's his right to leave when he wants, but there's a couple, at least 2 more really good series there from him on the table that will probably always be left on the table, because I think he's got no intention of coming back at all. Like, he absolutely, he has it perfect. There's an inscrutable wit with just the right amount of grumpiness. Like, he's still grumpy, but not as much as it was before. It's, when you're baking something, you don't just need the right ingredients, but the right mix. A third of flour or a quarter of flour. It's like you need to get that mix right, and he gets the mix right of everything, and he's just mysterious enough because he doesn't want to give too much away. You need that. You always need that with any version of the Doctor. He's just mysterious enough, but mysterious enough that you want to find out more. That Bill wants to find out more. So you will follow this character, and if he invites you in this little blue box that's actually a lot bigger than you think, you're like, okay, let's go. It's a very good point as well, Ken, about the relationship is now a teacher-student, partly because of the huge age gap, which is definitely the right thing to do, particularly for this Doctor. And we're going to rewatch in the episode, the Doctor is actually drawn to Bill immediately. The very first scene is Bill has been invited to his office, and he asks her about, why do you keep coming to my lectures? You're not a student here. And I think this part of my Doctor can be attracted to the next companion is he sees Bill, correctly, as like a fellow outsider, but is also intellectually curious. And she's clever, but she's not kind of academically smart. That was a really nice, but I think part of the reason I enjoy Bill so much is that, look, we don't know exactly where she grew up, but she has very much a working class deportment. The kind of person that didn't go to uni. And not because they were never smart enough, but they didn't have the opportunity, didn't have the means. And the Doctor, I think, spots that with her, and it's like, but you have everything you should need to be able to expand your mind. So I think that's part of why the Doctor is initially drawn to her, and even though he doesn't want to invite anyone, he shouldn't be leaving Earth. Like, that's the thing that drives him to get back in the TARDIS, go travelling, because we're led to believe in the episode he hasn't done it for a little while. So what's the thing that gets him doing it? It's this human. It's this human who's almost worthy of being his companion. And with that, you've got to get the casting right. If you don't get the casting right, and we don't see what the Doctor sees, then it becomes a lot less interesting. Bill's arc and this episode, and they get that right. And the final thing I just wanted to add is, we, in my opinion, we'd come off the back of 3 pretty lackluster series of Doctor Who in a row. Interspersed, there was the 50th anniversary, which was great, was in there as well, but the 3 week-to-week series, they range from mediocre to bad. And I was worried coming into this, particularly Moffat's final series, how motivated is he going to be? He's looking for the exit door anyway. I was worried it was going to be 4 in a row. So I was so reassured after this episode of, oh, okay, well, this show's pointing in the right direction. Moffat's going to leave it in a decent place when he leaves, and I think creatively he did. If we move on to number 4, so Jen, what episode is your number 4 from?
It's actually funny that Ken's number 5 was Spyfall, because my number 4 is The Woman Who Fell to Earth.
Who are you?
I'm glad you asked that again. Bit of adrenaline, dash of outrage, any panic, knitting my brain back together. I know exactly who I am. I'm the Doctor. Sorting out fair play throughout the universe. Now please, get off this planet, or you still have a choice.
Which was Jodie's first appearance as the Doctor officially. As much as you could say about Chibnall's run, this was a great introduction for her, because there was already this huge blow up of, oh my god, the Doctor's going to be a woman, and then she just kind of came on the scene just right out of the gate, and I was very hopeful for the rest of the series. Not only her coming on as the first true female Doctor, but also having 3 companions, 2 of them being people of color. I thought it was really great that they were branching out like that. I had high hopes. I fell in love with Jodie as a character and as an actress, because I'd only ever seen her in Broadchurch previously. So this was, in my opinion, a breath of fresh air, because she still had a couple of the tiny little quirks from previous Doctors in her character when she started, but she also was trying to make it her own with some other quirks, like her outfit, and her screwdriver was so different from everybody else's with the crystal on the end and everything else. But everyone was either really had high hopes for her or low hopes for her, because people are weird. But her coming on, I think, was great, at least as a start for her as the newest Doctor. I kept thinking, I'm totally forgetting the name of Graham's wife. I thought she was going to be a 4th companion, and it turned out not the case. That was kind of what motivated Graham to go with her in the first place, was his wife died.
So Grace, is it Grace?
Grace, I think that's right, yeah.
I'm not actually confirmed. Yes, Grace, it is Grace.
Yes, but I loved her, and I kept thinking she was also going to be popping along, but it didn't happen. I loved Grace. In the few minutes that we saw her on screen, I loved her. She would have been great as kind of a go-between with the new Doctor too, but obviously didn't happen. Overall, I think it was a good starting point for Jodie. I mean, just the line where she says, a few minutes ago, I was an old Scotsman. She had a great cadence to her speech.
It is a great starting point for a brand new Doctor. They definitely give Jodie Whittaker great chance to have the action hero role. What was impressive in the story is that Chibnall just wrote the character as the Doctor and just let it go from there. And to his credit and to their credit, it works. And it's big and it's cinematic.
Yeah, I did think particularly the night scenes where the episode culminates, actually some of the best looking stuff I've seen on Doctor Who. And there always is with a new series. It'll be the same for Nshuti's first full series episode. There is new pressure just with a new team. There's always the kind of that, okay, it's like if your favourite sports team's got a new coach or new players, you're like, and it's the first game of the season, it's like, okay, so how are we going to go? How's this going to fit? Is this going to work? Is this going to work out? There's always going to be a lot of attention on this episode. It was also the first, in the new era at least, the first Sunday episode. Doctor Who is now on Sundays, not on Saturdays. I'm glad that's kind of ended that experiment. There is a lot going in, a lot to carry, going what we were saying right before we started about the pressure of being in Doctor Who. There was a lot of pressure going, a lot of expectation going in, a lot of, even from just not the sexists or people that were like, what I'm watching because it's a women Doctor, just fans that were just like, I just hope it's good. I want it to be a good episode. There is that nervous energy going in, and unlike Ncuti Gatwa and unlike David Tennant, they didn't get kind of a Christmas episode to ease us in. I think it helps when you have that, so we're already getting acclimatized. Jodie Whittaker didn't have that on her side. Just even from a writing perspective, it's Chibnall, and look, he chose to do this, but he gave himself a lot to juggle, because you introduce a new Doctor, the villain is a new villain, it's not one of the classic ones, it's not like a Dalek don't show up, a Cyberman don't show up, and also you're writing in 3 new companions, and you have to give them all a reason to travel with the Doctor at the end of this episode. You have to introduce them, bring them on the adventure, and then explain why they would then travel with the Doctor and why the Doctor would want them to travel with her. There's a lot going on juggling here, and I don't think it was always successful. I think it was mostly successful. I thought this was a solid opening episode. And you definitely not want to have it, being an issue in anyone's top 5. So, Ken, if we come to your number 4, which is my number 3 and also Jen's number 3. So, Ken, what episode is your number 4?
My number 4 is Impossible Astronaut.
Mr. President? That child just told you everything you need to know. You weren't listening. Never mind. The answer is yes. I'll take the case. Fellas, a gun, really? I just walked into the highest security office in the United States, parked a big blue box on the rug. You think you could just shoot?
And I thought that this story was just larger than life, very easy to get hooked. In this episode, you have some of the best cast he's ever had, with Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill and Matt Smith and Alex Kingston. Excellent chemistry amongst them, interesting characters. Everything about the Moffat era of Doctor Who is crammed into this. You have astronauts, you have monsters that we just don't understand, plot to destroy the world, trip to America, cowboy hats. Richard Nixon is your bad guy, maybe not, who knows. Overall, just fun, interesting. Moffat at his best, just running around, confusing you, using the idea of a time travel show to his advantage.
Yeah, because we've all got this in a similar place. Jen, so you've got this as your number 3.
Also, an add on what Ken just said, just also has a mystery. Who kills the Doctor? We know who it is by the end of the episode, and it's very good writing. It's very good writing with a mystery, and the fact, it starts off with the Doctor sending notes to all his companions, including River, to show up at this spot at this particular time, and all this, like, what the heck's going on? You got a letter too? You got a letter too? You got a letter too? And then culminating in the scene. Then it goes into how it got to that point. Classic Doctor Who of time wobbly, wibbly, timey-wimey, with Smith and the rest of them just all on their A game throughout the whole episode. The writing was spectacular. I would call it one of the pinnacle episodes of New Who. And since we all have it on our list, I think y'all agree.
Can you said this kind of episode, Moffat almost throws all of his tricks at this, and this is in a good way. This episode feels like Moffat at his most Moffat. This is his second series now. It's Matt Smith's second series now, so they've done one, and part of that one, I think, was easing us out of Russell T Davies and David Tennant, because Davies in particular, for many people, me included, he was all that I'd known as how Doctor Who can be written, what you got to get from an episode, how a story arc goes and everything. And mostly, obviously we had Eccleston for a year, but mostly it's Tennant, so Doctor Who kind of feels like it's them. They are Doctor Who and Doctor Who is them. And I think the first series of Moffat and Smith, to an extent, is weaning us off that, and now it's like, okay, you've had that year, this is now the Stephen Moffat show, this is now the Matt Smith show. We are driving this car, and we're going to drive it where we want it to go. I mean, there's a case for saying this might be the most American episode Doctor Who's ever done. Even down to I remember so much of the promotion was that Doctor Who Goes America, as in the episode is going to be set in America and we're filming it in America. The Doctor who'd been, the character in the show had been in quote-unquote America before, but there's like, no, we're actually going there. We're going to film it there. You're talking about involving the moon landing, which is such, it's one of the most important things in like human endeavor, but that's an American story. That's part of the American cultural narrative. We landed on the moon. You included Nixon, and not just like, oh, we're mentioning President Nixon. No, we're having an actor portray Nixon with a not insignificant amount of screen time. Like, this felt so ambitious, and it felt an ambitious time in Doctor Who, because even with the promotion for the episode, Doctor Who felt like, okay, part of when you do the promotion for the new series, we're going to America. So they did Comic-Con. They did like Nerdist, and they did, I think one of them when Matt Smith might go on Craig Ferguson's old talk show. It felt consciously like we're trying to show ourselves, we're puffing our chest out, we're trying to put ourselves among the other kind of big geek shows, which I think they're trying to do again now, but obviously they have a bit more means now. But this felt new, because I don't know how much they'd done Comic-Con. They did Comic-Con to promote the end of time, so like the end of the Tennant Davis run, but I don't think they'd really done that before. That wasn't part of what we did. But this felt ambitious, even down to the promotion, as much as the episode of, no, let's try really stretch our legs. We're going to go to America. We're going to promote ourselves in America the way that all the other shows will. We're going to film it in America. We're going to take on a big story. Like if Star Trek did an episode about the moon landing, that would felt like it would be a significant episode of Star Trek. This felt like they aimed really, really high. I don't think they necessarily hit that, but I don't think they were miles off either. And it felt, just as a one-off episode, it felt Doctor Who going somewhere really new. This felt like a new era for the show. Everything about it felt like, oh, I haven't seen them ever do something like this before. Like when Moffat's firing, he writes episodes with real verve and a bit of flair to them, and this episode has a lot of that. A lot of sharp one-liners, a lot of quick, even how it's filmed, the cuts are quick. Smith is totally at ease with the character. The way that I spoke Capaldi was in the pilot. Matt Smith is just, I know what to do, I know this character. It's not easy, of course, he's making it look easy. Now, he's totally in his groove now. Also, we got a look at the silence, which had been teased for over a year. We won't get into how we think that arc resolved itself, but as a one-off episode, I thought it was an amazing intro to a new villain. Again, a very ambitious, in terms of their look, their power, and also to put into context as well, this was when Moffat was very much if Moffat creates a new villain, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be an epic villain that's going to be among the best villains in the show's history, so there was a lot of expectation. I think they really tried to hit a home run with this. I don't think they hit a home run, but I think they hit a triple. I still think they did a very good job. This is still a very entertaining episode. It moves at such great pace, wildly enjoyable. I definitely think for ambition, 10 out of 10 for ambition. Like, they really didn't pull any punches. They went for it. They really went for it. And got most of it.
Overall, I think everything just gelled perfectly. For the most part, leading up to the reveal of who was in the suit was just brilliant.
So many big swings in this episode. And I think, to your earlier point, that's part of why we've all got it. We've all got it in our top fives. So if we move to my number 4, and my number 4 is Asylum of the Daleks.
What do you know of the Dalek Asylum?
According to legend, you have a dump ground. Planet where you lock the Daleks go wrong. The battles are insane. The ones even you control. It's never made any sense to me.
Why not?
Because you just kill them.
It is offensive to us to extinguish such divine hatred.
Offensive.
Does it surprise you to know that Daleks have a concept of beauty?
I thought you'd run out of ways to make me sick. Hello again. You think hatred is beautiful.
Perhaps that is why we have never been able to kill you.
And this episode is an interesting one. This is the year after The Impossible Astronaut. And having actually rewatched this last night, this episode is kind of part action film, part video game. This is kind of the closest Doctor Who gets to Die Hard. And I wouldn't have noticed that at the time of just rewatching it, where you're having to navigate through an enclosed space, crawling with enemies, and often improvising a plan. And a place that you didn't go there because you were looking for trouble. The basic synopsis is the Doctor, Amy and Rory are transported into a Dalek spaceship and into the Parliament of the Daleks, and they ask the Doctor for help because their asylum has been taken over, and they are kind of forcing the Doctor really to go destroy the place and blow it up. And the extra complication of this, and this we've spoken about this episode before again in our twists, was that the person down there causing all the trouble is who we at the time believed to be the next companion, because Jenna Coleman had been cast, but she was not meant to be starting for another on our screens for like another, I think, 6-7 months. So she shows up totally unexpected. Immediately, that, like Moffat can do his best, sends our head spinning of like, so what's going on and how's this being resolved? This episode moves at such a great pace. Other important subplot is Amy and Rory have been separated, or not have been separated. They are separated. They are on the verge of getting a divorce. So the episode is as much about the Doctor trying to reconcile Amy and Rory as it is the actual adventure. Another way it's like Die Hard, a broken marriage and reconciled after some peril and violence. Because Amy and Rory, obviously are not going to stay separated. The argument they have that then leads to the reconciliation, I think, is actually a really, really good scene.
Amy, basically, the fact of our relationship is that I love you more than you love me, which today is good news. It might just save both of our lives.
How can you say?
2,000 years. Wait for you outside of saying it was true. And no, it's true. Give me your arm. Amy!
Don't you dare say that to me. Don't you ever dare.
Amy, you kicked me out.
I want kids. You've always wanted kids. Ever since you were a kid. I can't help them.
I know.
Whatever they did to me in Demons Run. I can't ever give you children. I didn't kick you out. I gave you up. Don't you dare talk to me wait, inside the box, because that's nothing compared to giving you up.
It's one of the best ones for Moffat that's not fantastical, that isn't about, timey-wimey stuff or paradoxes or time loops. It's very RTD-like. Very kind of, it's almost domesticated episode in a way. It's one of the best pieces of acting from Karen Gillan. Like, she didn't get the chance because of just Moffat's style of writing, but when she got a chance to portray like intense emotions, I think she really excelled. It's actually a great intro for Jenna Coleman. I actually think this is maybe her best performance in Doctor Who in this. I think she's really, really good in this. I think the Dalek episode, I think it's the best modern Dalek episode that's not called Dalek, as well as a great reset at the end, which is a nice reset because it can get kind of a little bit stale if it's like, oh, we meet again, Doctor. But where it's like, I don't know who this person is, but this person is an enemy that must be like exterminated. So this, I think, was a very fun, action-packed episode. Smith is Smith at this point. I mean, this is before the time where I think maybe he's starting to get a bit tired of it all. And also I think he works great with Arthur Darvill and Karen Gillan. I think those three always had tremendous chemistry. So as an episode, this was actually a lot more fun than I was expecting, because I was kind of like, oh, another Dalek episode, and I don't know if Moffat's record with the Daleks is always great, but this was actually very entertaining. They make the Daleks, I think, genuinely terrifying, and I think it's probably his best Dalek written episode.
You notice a lot of the ones that we're picking are ones with really cool twists or mysteries. And we finally got Daleks that didn't have Nicholas Briggs' voice, because he was always the Daleks. And then we had a couple of other voice actors doing some other Daleks to show that they were quote-unquote different, because this was an asylum. It was just nice to see a different kind of Dalek, other than the, exterminate all the time. Okay,
so we've done my number 3, and we've done Jen's number 3, but we haven't done Ken's number 3. So, Ken, what episode is your number 3 from?
Mine is Deep Breath.
Are you cross?
I am not cross. But if I was cross, it would be your fault. And yes, I am cross.
I guess.
I am extremely cross.
And if I had my face, would you be cross?
I could be cross if I wasn't cross.
Why?
An ordinary person wants to meet someone they know very well for lunch. What do they do?
Well, they'll probably get in touch and suggest lunch.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what kind of person would put a quick note in a newspaper advert?
Well, I wouldn't like to say.
Go on, do say.
Well, I would say that person would be an egomaniac game player. Sort of person.
Well, at least that hasn't changed.
Peter Capaldi's first story is the 12th Doctor. Could be a relaunch. It should be a relaunch. Anytime you have a new Doctor, I don't particularly think that's the case with this story. Moffat surrounds his new Doctor with a few things. He's got Clara there, who bridges from 11 to 12, and then brings the Paternoster gang in for good measure, which I'm always good with. I like when they're there it's fun. It's part of the fun of Doctor Who to have the group of friends of the Doctor who pop up every now and again and don't necessarily have to be a companion, but kind of know the Doctor's history. I like that. And of course, that gives us a chance with Strax to have a little comedy relief in there, and then there's always a chance for action when the three of them are together. And the Doctor, of course, is always going to be a little bit out of it, so he's got to find his footing as the Doctor. And I think this is a good vehicle for Capaldi to kind of show us what his Doctor is going to be. And that's why it's as high as it is. The downside for me, and why I don't consider this a good reset, is that in my mind, Moffat makes a critical error at the end of this story by having Matt Smith phone Clara to say, no, it's going to be all right with this guy, this new Doctor. You'll be fine. And that's really done to hand off for the audience who were nervous about the new Doctor. That never happened in the past. It shouldn't have happened here. Peter Capaldi's an established and fantastic enough actor for that not to have taken place. And I have in the past, and I'll continue to equate it to when the J.J. Abrams made the Star Trek films, the sort of alternate timeline of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, and they called on Leonard Nimoy from an alternate universe to come and solve the problem for the new crew. And that basically reduced the new crew's power to nothing, because they had to call one of the classics in. And that's kind of how I feel about the little Matt Smith cameo. It's one of the reasons why this isn't higher on my list. For me, it's a sign of nervousness. There was no reason for it. What? Oh, Clara, this is still me. Actually, Clara, you can go and get us Bill in here sooner, and that would have been good. This is the impossible girl who's seen everything. Well, then why does she have to be explained to?
Yeah, and this is true companion as audience in that moment. It does show a lack of almost confidence.
A lack of confidence
in what you're doing.
And you had an episode that up until this point has been really excellent, really strong, and then they trip and fall a little bit, or should say stumble a little bit here. They quickly make up for it as his first season goes along. And there's a few episodes that I like that other people don't particularly like. Like, I'm a fan of Robots of Sherwood, because I like a little fun, and I like not always taking everything seriously. And so that was a chance to show Capaldi having a little fun, not taking himself too seriously. And definitely a teaser of a Doctor that would come out with a guitar riding a tank not too long after.
This one in particular, I remember two things that were really great about that I personally like: steampunk and Michelle Gomez. The fact they went kind of a darker direction with it, I adore, because I like horror. Not like horror, but I like thriller horror. And this had just enough of weirdness to it that I liked it, like with the guy, the half-face man, and his like steampunky face. It was great. I loved it, but most people thought it was kind of weird. And then the introduction of Missy in a small cameo, kind of teasing her arc over the course of that particular series. I love Michelle Gomez. Just like Sacha Dhawan, I fell in love with her the first second I saw her. I have followed her career since the show. If you ever get a chance to watch Doom Patrol, she's in 2 of the seasons, and she's amazing.
Or Green Wing.
Oh, yeah. I haven't watched. Yeah, I'm still catching up on her stuff. She was a breath of fresh air. Of course, we only got a teeny little tidbit of her in this particular episode, but I do agree that the phone call was a bit much, but in the spur of the moment while it was first aired, a lot of people were like, oh, that's so sweet. But in hindsight, yeah, it was kind of cheeseball, and it kind of felt like they didn't have confidence in the fan base to accept the new Doctor. Because Smith had been so popular, just like Tennant was, I actually teared up when it happened, when I originally watched it. I was like, that's so sweet. And now, yeah, talking more about it, it was a bit much. Capaldi did great with what he was given. The writing wasn't always great, but he has put a lot of his all into what he was given. My props to him, and I realize he doesn't want to come back to the character ever, which that's his right, just like Eccleston doesn't want to do it for different reasons. But I think it was a great introduction to him as a Doctor. It gave us a little bit more into Clara, introduced Missy. Ben Wheatley is a horror director, but you kind of, And it reflects in this particular episode. But he didn't go all out like he usually does in his movies. This was steampunky body horror with a dinosaur thrown in for whatever reason. And, I mean, it's not in my top 5 for obvious reasons. I like the aesthetic of it. But I see where you would enjoy that, Ken.
I mean, there is one, like the individual scene when the characters are about to run out of oxygen. I think is a well-directed scene, and as an idea for a story, it's great. Along with the tone, I wonder if maybe they overcomplicated it, because it's new Doctor, not knowing what's going on, companion getting used to Doctor, and Madame Vastra, and Jenny, the whole Paternoster gang, and this new villain, and this thing about the idea of removing oxygen or not being able to breathe or you get caught. A lot of things are happening at once, and I don't think they fit it all in. When you're trying to fit too much in, all of it's unsatisfactory. None of it's fulfilling. So it was an episode that I definitely look back as a, not just a miss, a curious miss. Like, some episodes are bad, I'm just like, yeah, that just wasn't very good. But Deep Breath is more I would genuinely love to know more about how this was put together and what the initial presentation was and what happened in the lead up in the pre-production, what happened in production, and what happened in the edit. I would be genuinely interested to know, because there is, I think, a very good episode in here, and one I was hugely looking forward to. But I think it's an episode that people definitely have strong feelings about one way or another. So if we move to, because my number 2 is Partners in Crime, which we've spoken about, and Ken's number 2 is The Pilot, which we've spoken about. However, Jen, your number 2 we haven't spoken about yet. So what episode is your number 2 from?
Oh, and this is going to throw everyone for a loop, but believe it or not, my number 2 is the 8th Doctor TV movie.
Who are you?
I was dead too long this time. The anesthetic almost destroyed the regenerative process.
Yeah. Right. I'm gonna get a syringe. I'm gonna take some blood.
Grace. Don't you see? I've 13 lives.
Please. Okay, you're trying to tell me that you've come back from the dead.
Yes.
No, sorry. The dead stay dead. Can't turn back time.
Yes, I can.
I'm not a child. Don't talk to me like I'm a child. Only children believe that crap. I am a doctor.
But it was a child's dream that made you a doctor. You dreamt you could hold back death. Isn't that true?
Which definitely counts. We do think that is allowed.
You got to understand, back in 1996, when this pilot came out, we hadn't had Who for 7 years. And this was done by an American show creator who was trying to bring it back specifically for an American audience originally. Obviously, they cast a British actor to play the part. They cast Paul McGann. He'd been in some stuff, but wasn't really known to the American audiences yet. Over here in the States, he was practically an unknown when he was cast. They did have a cameo, obviously, by Sylvester McCoy as the 7th Doctor for the Regeneration in the pilot. There was a couple of weird plot choices, like for some reason they made the 8th Doctor half human and some other things. But I like it because of the fact, after 7 years of drought, we finally got a new Who. It was specifically for Americans. I actually saw it in real time when it came out. I've been watching Who on and off in reruns since Baker. And I was like, yes, new Who for us. It's great. Hey! So that was like a really big deal. And then they have, quote unquote, unknown for the Doctor. And then they cast a known actor for the Master. That transformation gave me nightmares, if you remember what happened with that, where this worm, takes over this dude's body, and it's Eric Roberts, and what the hell? That was very nightmare-inducing. But overall, it was a nice reintroduction for people who had only known old Who at the time. The companion was, what was her name? Her name was also Grace.
Grace, what?
Yes. I wasn't too thrilled with the romance that they had, but then they also added, I think this was the first time we ever had a companion for the Master in an episode or whatever, because they had the what was his name, the Asian kid. He was kind of sort of the Master's companion for that TV movie.
Chang Li.
Yes, thank you.
Doesn't he come round? Doesn't he kind of come round by the end, if I'm remembering right?
He does by the end, because he does. But for a short while, he is technically the Master's companion, which had never been done before. But at the time, in 96, it was so cool to see a new Doctor, and I like the idea. It's just some of the elements of it didn't work out, and obviously it was a backdoor pilot that they didn't go any further with it. It's a shame that for most people who didn't hear the radio plays or anything else, they got such a short look at him as the Doctor. But I think as far as initially to reintroduce the character to a new audience, they tried, they failed, but it was a nice attempt.
This is one of the older bits of Doctor Who that I have seen, and it is definitely a real curio. Like, I think its place in the where it's done in Doctor Who is interesting. Like, I don't think anyone's ever going to say it's the best Doctor Who, but I think there are some people that have fondness for it, particularly older fans, because it's a little bit like talking to kids. Kids, you don't understand. Back in the day, we only had like 5 channels and we only had a Doctor Who TV movie, and that's all we had. And we learned to love it. So there is a bit of, I think, more latitude is given to this, because you could see everyone really tried really hard, and they kind of were, you're kind of swimming upstream trying to make Doctor Who back then. It's an American team, and I have no doubt they did it out of genuine affection and love for the character. But it does come off as a very Americanized feature-length episode, and not feeling, I think, what people were being used to with Doctor Who. Ironically, what kind of a Doctor Who episode might be changing later this year. We've spoken about this before. I don't think this show's suddenly going to become massively Americanized, but I do think it might feel a bit different to what we're used to, partly because of increased resources. I'm sure the people love watching this will look at the resource they have now and be like, what we could have made if we had that money. I think they were kind of slightly trying to make a big splash, but with one hand tied behind their back. So I feel like this is not one of my favourite bits of Doctor Who, but I do feel, I don't know if defensive is the odd word, but if people come around to shit on it, I always do feel the urge to say, well, hold on, before you totally write this off, an explanation of why you should at least, if not actually enjoy it, have time for it. And it's not something I would ever tell someone to not watch.
The thing about the 96 movie, its significance as this, like you said, this kind of curiosity item, is that it really taught RTD and his crew what not to do when bringing the show back in 2005. And what I mean by that is that not that this movie is some kind of disaster, but it tried to be everything to everyone at the same time. So the previous Doctor and all the history and all this kind of stuff, that's crammed into the first half hour of this movie. And if you were a casual or coming to the show for the first time, you might feel a little overwhelmed by all this lore for casual viewers and definitely new viewers who were turning this on for the first time. They may have been a little bit overwhelmed by that. And I think what that taught Russell in 2005 was let it drip out slowly. Start it again and let it come out slowly. Man of mystery meets this girl. She's kind of intrigued by him. Mannequins that come to life. All that kind of stuff drips out slowly. And the audience follows Rose along as we slowly start to learn about this mysterious character. In 96, they had this 2-hour movie, which amounted to 90 minutes, accounting for commercials. They had 90 minutes, which is really a 4-part story in classic Doctor Who, to get all this stuff out and try to get you up to speed. And because it was trying to be everything to everybody, it turned out to be not that. Now, there's plenty of positives in it. The casting was a lot of fun. First off, Paul McGann is incredible as the 8th Doctor. We're lucky to have him in audios and continuing to pop up with things like Night of the Doctor and getting a chance to sort of canonize his Doctor. But let's face it, we've got Disney Plus now. We want to see a Paul McGann 8th Doctor series. So I'm lobbying for that hard. And then you had Grace and Chang, who I thought would have been potential great companions to go along with. Grace was a doctor, a medical doctor, and much like Liz Shaw in the 3rd Doctor's first season, having someone who could kind of understand some of the technobabble from time to time, as opposed to someone who you had to explain every little detail to. I thought that was a positive thing. I thought that was some of the things that I found interesting about the 96 movie. But I'm glad it made the list because I have a soft spot for it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the unwelcome stepchild. Bridge between the new and the old Who.
And I think it's a very significant point that even if you watch and didn't enjoy it, you have to, if you're going to be fair-minded, you have to acknowledge its significance in the history of the show, and it's a very significant moment in the show. And also Paul McGann's Doctor, it seemed to make the first time they tried to, and this might be the American influence on storytelling, but make him consciously something more of a romantic hero. What I don't think the other Doctors were. Like, people may have liked the other Doctors, but they weren't consciously. This Doctor was a little bit more thirst forward, where I don't think any of his predecessors. Well, I think that's been an influence on aspects of the show since then, as well. I think definitely much of Moffat's writing. So it has played a significant part.
Phil Collinson, who's Russell's right-hand man in day-to-day operations, told me that it was the bridge. The way they didn't have to take the hit on a kiss or just minor changes to the character in 2005. 96 took all the hits, right? The first kiss happened there, and a little bit of the Americanization happened there, and the change and kind of the tone and the format, the way the show was going to be presented. It was less of a shock to Doctor Who fans in 2005 because it happened in 96.
Right, and it was also the first case of the female companion kissed him. It wasn't the other way around. I mean, this was a big step. She is the one who initiated it, and he was kind of just like, oh, okay.
Well, to be fair, it was Paul McGann. So
well, I mean, yeah, and she was pretty hot too. Let's be real. Daphne Ashbrook is not hard on the eyes. It was cool to see she was the one who initiated the kiss, which was very female forward at the time, especially in the 90s, where a lot of the time still it was usually the man who initiated the romance. So that was a big step too, which, as you said, bridges the way for later Who incarnations, as far as the companions being much stronger female characters, as far as personality, starting with Rose. It's just got a special place in my heart, as cheesy and as weird and as out of place as it seems to be between the new and the old. And the fact that McGann later on reprised the character through audio plays, and they also did like comic books and novels with him. I love McGann. It was actually the first time I ever saw him in anything, even though I know he'd been big in Britain for a while, but to American audiences, he was practically an unknown. And he was more of a comedic actor, if I remember correctly, wasn't he, Shane?
I'm trying to remember which one of them, because there's a load of brothers. They're like so many British versions of American versions are knockoffs. Like, the McGanns are kind of like the knockoff version of the Baldwins. So there's a family of actors. I know. So he may have done comedy. I know one of his brothers did comedy, and very much like the Baldwins with the McGanns, you're like, sorry, which one's which again? And he's the one that was in that thing, and he's the one that was in that thing. I mean, Paul McGann more recently has done serious drama. So has he done comedy? I would expect so. And he's a Scouser, so I'm sure he's funny.
I think he was brilliant in this. I just wish we'd had more of him on screen, other than two places.
It's a long-held position on analysing Doctor Who that we would love to see Paul McGann, if not as a full series, play this character on screen a little bit more. I think he's just about young enough to still do it, but the time is not infinite in the real world. I think we'll kind of get to the stage if it doesn't happen in the next 2-3 years, it's probably not happening. But I, would love it to happen, partly because we saw when he did it in the Time of the Doctor. It's like, oh no, he can still do this. He can do this with his eyes shut. Like, I'm not asking for Sylvester McCoy to come back. That would be unfair. But Paul McGann could still probably just about do this. So that was number 2. We're just going to hold off your number 1 for the moment, Jen, because we've already done my number 2 and Ken's number 2. But Ken and I have the same number 1. Ken, if you tell us what episode our number 1 is from.
Our number 1 is 11th Hour.
So that thing that hid in my house for 12 years.
Multiple millennia of years.
So how come you show up again on the very same day that do the same minute?
They're looking for him, but they saw me through the crack. Got a fix only like I am. What's he on about? Nurse, give me your phone.
Not really real.
He was never real. Now.
You mean?
It was just a game. We were kids. You made dress up as these photos. They're all the coma fish. Yep. No, all the multiple. 8 comas, 8 guys is Christmas 0.
He had a dog. There's a dog in a coma.
Well, coma patient walking a dog. Prison 0 dog. Laptop. Your friend, what was his name? Not the good-looking one.
Jeff.
Oh, thanks. He had a laptop in his bag. Big laptop. I need Jeff's laptop. You two, get to the hospital. Get everyone out that wall, clear the whole floor. Phone me when you're done.
The 11th Doctor's first episode. Matt Smith, it's Karen Gillan, it's Arthur Darvill, it's Stephen Moffat, all coming together. It's a lifetime of being a Doctor Who fan jammed into his vision in his first season, his vision of what Doctor Who would be. And the 11th hour gets us started off. It is a fairy tale. I was going to say it was a metaphor for a fairy tale, but it is a fairy tale. The whole season is a fairy tale about a girl who has an imaginary friend. And that imaginary friend is the Doctor, who isn't actually imaginary. Matt Smith hits a home run right out of the gate. He is the Doctor right from the minute he hits the screen. It's a great reset. If you've never seen the series and you started with the 11th hour, it's very easy to be hooked. It is everything that makes Moffat great. And I think if you come to Doctor Who perhaps from something like Sherlock or one of Moffat's other programs, and you start with the 11th hour, if you like his cooking, then you're going to like the taste of this meal.
This episode, I think, is one of the toughest episodes that there's ever been to write in Doctor Who. I mean, this is so easy to forget now, given what's happened since. But the pressure going into this, Davis is gone, Tennant is gone, and there was an unspoken feeling, and because the show had become so popular under them, there was an unspoken feeling that was just aroma in the atmosphere of, can Doctor Who really survive without them? Like, is this Doctor Who, is it really just a David Tennant show? It's the David Tennant show, and David Tennant isn't here, so is there actually anything left to watch? I think there was a lot of that going in, and as Jen has mentioned, that who's Matt Smith? Who's this guy? You got Carlos, I was like, I don't know who this guy is. Have I ever seen him in anything? There is aspects of, and mercifully, not all of it, but aspects of like the time traveler's wife in how the Doctor and Amelia, as she's at the time, meet. Ironically, Moffat did go on to adapt the time traveler's wife last year. There was just a lot of, I think, withdrawals of people still grieving Tennant going. And how can anyone else be the Doctor when Tennant has been? Now, obviously, if you're an old Doctor Who fan, you're just like, well, no, this is what the show is. But for a lot of newer fans, even with the era of Eccleston, Tennant kind of was the Doctor. He was what they knew. So the idea that someone else was going to do it, I just thought there was potentially so much "you're not my real dad" energy coming into this episode. and so for what they did, they not just succeeded, they succeeded at the highest level with this episode. It's not easy to do this anyway, but to do it given the context of the past, I think is astounding work. It's one of Moffat and Smith's finest hours, and the scene where he addresses the Atraxi and really becomes the Doctor in that moment, where he has shed the remains of Tennant's clothes and is now in his. I mean, it's almost like a superhero moment. Superman just put the cape on.
Initially, when he comes out, it's like, it's all, fish sticks and custard. What the hell? We thought he was going to be more comedic, and then suddenly he just stares down this giant eye that's looking at him, and he gets super threatening. I was like, oh, this guy means business. There's a little bit of the 10th Doctor in there as far as staring down an enemy and basically threatening them. But it was still Matt Smith's take on it, and it worked beautifully. And
an interesting PS, because the villain of the piece, the Atraxi, is briefly embodied in a hospital, briefly embodied by a human. Does anyone remember who the actor was who played that human?
Would they be an Academy Award winner?
They would be an Academy Award winning actor, yeah.
Oh, yes, I know. Oh, shoot.
Olivia Colman.
Thank you. Okay.
It's Olivia Colman. And what's so hilarious about that?
Be wasted in a role like this. They could have saved her.
Of course. The thing is about that as well, though, is that if they'd have filmed this a year later, you ain't getting Olivia Colman in this episode. Definitely not to do that, because this was just before. It was so close to when she went from just a jobbing actor, because I'd seen her and stuff before, so I recognised her. But she went from a jobbing actor into British national treasure, who then became Academy Award winning actor and one of the most sought after actors in the world. So every now and then you might see her in something. Her most famous thing, she was in the sitcom Peep Show that was co-created by the showrunner of Succession. She was like the sixth most important person in that show, and she was good, she was fine, but no one saw that and was like, that's one of the best actors in the world. Of course, give someone the opportunity and then they might show they are one of the best actors in the world. So the timing of this is just, from outside this episode, is just fascinating, because it's so close to her becoming an absolute star in the UK and then becoming a bigger star outside. The idea of her in Doctor Who now is like, I don't know, even with Disney, I don't know if there's enough zeros on that check. It's incredible if you go and watch an episode and you're like, hold on, is that Olivia Colman? It's like, yeah, it is. That's her. And she's great. She has like 4 lines, but she's great in them.
Tom Hopper's in this episode, too, who a lot of people know later on. He was in Game of Thrones, he was in Black Sails, he was in Merlin, and most recently he plays one of the more important characters in Umbrella Academy. He's in that.
Yeah, he's the guy that needs to delete his internet history. I mean, that's always a fun thing that Doctor Who does. It does so great to kind of see that show sometimes make stars, or see people that go on to become big were in this show. But yeah, this I think was such a tough episode to write, and they really get the balance and the tone right. Obviously, the performances are very good, even though the actors are still figuring their characters out. But the performances were of a really high standard, and I watched this and I was like, I kind of exhaled a sigh of relief. I'm like, oh, we're fine, because we knew Moffat had written great episodes before, but it's different between doing that and then being the actual showrunner. Different job, ask different things from you, different skill set. But at the end of this, I was like, oh, the show's fine. Moffat wrote a great episode. This guy's great. Yeah, he definitely is the Doctor. Nothing to worry about, everyone. All systems go. Roll on for the rest of the series. Jen, we can move on to your number one, which is the final one of our top 5. So, what episode's your number 1 from?
Yeah. So you guys talked about, the introduction of the 11th Doctor. For me, it is the introduction of the 9th Doctor.
What is Arthur?
Yep. Plastic.
Clever, nice trick. Who were they? Students. It's a student thing or what?
Why would we students?
I don't know.
Well, you said why students?
Because to get that many people dressed up and silly, they got to be students.
That makes sense. Well done.
Thanks.
They're not students.
Whoever they are, we'll surprise them, please.
Who's was?
Chief electrician.
Wilson's dad.
Kind of bridging off of, Paul McGann bringing back Who for a new audience. It started with this particular episode and this was I believe this was the first Doctor we did not see the regeneration first before kind of jumping in. He just was there. I'm not sure why they did it that way. I guess it was to add a little bit more mystery to the 9th Doctor initially, or they just wanted to basically go, well, we already know he regenerated, let's just skip that. I'm not sure. But Davies and Eccleston went in with heels down and brought us New Who, and everyone was hooked. And then adding Billie Piper to the mix, who I'd never seen her in anything else before this. She was great. There's a reason why she's one of the more popular companions. She was a teenager, and she was very headstrong, and she basically was like, I have this boring life working in a retail store, and this guy suddenly shows up when I'm on an adventure. Cool. And I thought it was a wonderful way for people to jump in and just go in straight out the gate, have a new Doctor, a new companion, new showrunner, and it worked out. It was beautiful, and I was hooked from the get-go. And Eccleston was one of the more subdued Doctors of the bunch, but that was totally fine. He didn't have all of the eccentric quirks that a lot of other Doctors had. I would say he was kind of closer to the 2nd Doctor, who's very subdued in his own way, with just a little bit of quirkiness to him. I just think it was a great reintroduction a second time around, where Davies got it right. As we just previously talked about, he knew what not to do because of what happened with the 8th Doctor.
Rose kind of is to Doctor Who what Iron Man is to the MCU, as in it's a start of something new, and you don't have all the incredible things that came after without this. I think Rose, the way that I sometimes see Iron Man as in the film, not the character, in people's top 5 MCU films, that sometimes Rose makes people's top 5 Doctor Who. And I think it's just because what it's responsible for. That's a big reason why it's responsible for so much. All of what we've spoken about today, or by the TV movie, including the stuff with going on the set right now with Millie Gibson, is she leaving, is she staying, whatever. None of that happens without Rose. Rose is, and its success is responsible for so much. And I like with Iron Man, there was a degree of skepticism going in, and there was a lot, including for me, a lot of skepticism around Doctor Who being on TV and back on TV. And a lot of people, at least my understanding is, I didn't see it live myself, but people watching were like TV reviewers in the newspapers, people who don't do the TV columns in the newspapers, they were ready to shit on it immediately. I think they had almost the articles written, and then they were forced to change because they were like, oh, I enjoyed that. That was actually quite good. Billie Piper had acted before. This was quite early in her acting career, and there was skepticism, including around her, because she was obviously known as a pop star that flamed out. So the idea of her as an actor, I think, felt kind of ridiculous, and another thing that people were ready to jump on. And then again, people had to go, oh, she's good at this. She's really good at this. And Christopher Eccleston, I remember David saying part of the reason why Eccleston was cast was because he felt it was important just to have a good actor. A really solid, reliable, high-quality actor playing this part. I understand what a shrewd idea that is, to have someone who may not embody the qualities you usually see in a Doctor, but someone that, well, this is a compelling presence, and I will be interested in whatever this person does. I think besides the no regeneration, I mean, this Doctor has existed for a while. We're coming in the midway, and I imagine Paul McGann would have liked to have done it. But I think Davis, as I think he's doing, as we'll find out in a few months' time, I think he's trying to do something brand new, and not pretend the past didn't happen. But this is very much, we're not wedded to the past. This is a new Doctor who's having adventures, and the idea of, well, you can't see the new Doctor until you've seen the old Doctor, I think there was very much why not? Also, so much time had passed as well, and he's thinking about people sitting down in front of the TV for the first time who've never watched the show before or were too young to have seen the show before. I think we'll have something not too dissimilar with Ncuti as well. And we'll talk more about this close to the time, but maybe a bit of... But this happened with Capaldi. Why do you mention that? And it's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not what they're trying to do, at least at the beginning. I think once you get people in, then they'll be more amenable to hearing, hey, did you know that, like, 80 years ago the Doctor did this with this person, or the Doctor was best friends with this person, this happened to them? I don't think that's maybe the case, and I don't think that was the case here. I'm just going off memory now, so you correct me if I'm wrong, but was there like really much mention of anything to do with the Doctor's past? I don't even think Gallifrey was even mentioned, was it? He just said he was an alien. Oh yeah, and that came in the later episodes where he talked about he was responsible for the destruction of Gallifrey. That came in later episodes. Initially he was just tabula rasa, he's an alien, has a phone box to travel around in, let's go.
It goes back to that lesson learned in 96 is don't info dump right at the start. Let there be some mystery. That mystery works to your favor dramatically, you know. The old fans are on board and want to see it succeed because they want their show back. The new fans, they're along for the mystery. They're along for the ride. And this is a case where it satisfies both people. Because as an old fan, I was hooked. There was enough of a mystery around the Eccleston Doctor. Why does he look like this? What's happened? Why is he so somber? There was just as much of mystery to old fans who even, we knew he regenerates and he's from Gallifrey and all this, but there was still like, wait a minute, something must have happened to make him this way. And so I remember in 2005 just saying, I'm on this trip with you. I want to find out what happened to my hero, you know. It was a difficult balancing act to pull off, and I do think they mostly, even with the restrictions that they had, as far as like budget and expectations and low expectations, a lack of enthusiasm. I think there was a lack of enthusiasm, which credit to the whole team, they all changed around very quickly. And even though Rose isn't not really going to be my top 5, it is one of the most significant episodes of Doctor Who ever made. It's so important. And the reason, well, I mean, when it came out, I watched it 8 million times, but the reason why it doesn't have an instant rewatch value to me is we already know the story. So I have a tendency to not go back to episodes where I have to have something explained to me, because I already know it. To me, that's Rose, and even although I've rated 11th Hour so highly, it isn't one I'm going to go and rewatch quickly for the same reason. I already know how the ball gets rolling. I'd rather jump in once the Doctor is already doing things. It doesn't mean it's insignificant, and it doesn't mean it's not a perfect episode, because Rose really, really is an excellent episode and a great starting place for anybody. We did speak about Rose in a bit more detail in one of our older pod episodes. We did a kind of Hall of Fame for Billie Piper, and Rose did feature quite high in our discussions on that. So it is an incredibly significant addition, and it is responsible for a lot of good things that has come, and that will continue to come after. You've got to start somewhere, and this was a really good starting point. So it definitely makes sense why it's definitely one of our number ones. You know, you also both, because Doctor Who is 60 years old, not 19 years old, so there have been good series openers before Russell T Davies came on board. And I know you both, Ken and Jenn. Jenn, you had some honourable mentions from back in the day you wanted to mention as well?
Yeah, there's one I have, which for amusement factor is Time in the Rainy, which was the transition from the 6th to the 7th Doctor, because of the fact that we know that Baker had been fired. And when they did the regen scene in particular, because they fired him, they actually had to put Sylvester McCoy in a blonde wig. Not so much for it, being a good episode, just the fact that they had to go that far for the regen. It's an honorable mention for me for the fact that they had to go to that route to do a regen scene.
And again, I know you get some honorable mentions as well.
I do. I'll without An Unearthly Child, we don't even have a television show. It wasn't even on my list, but I think, well, being that we've mentioned Rose in such high regard, because it is the starting point, and there's so much history there. The same thing goes for the very first 25 minutes with An Unearthly Child, and Doctor Who shares a trait with Star Trek and Game of Thrones. So 3 major franchises, long-running franchises, that have something in common, and that is a pilot that was shot more than once. All 3 series had a rejected pilot that went back and reshot. But in Doctor Who's case, they didn't rewrite it or recast it. They actually went back and basically did the exact same thing over again.
In fact, another episode you can add to that list is Sherlock.
That's true.
Yeah. Now, a couple of season openers in the classic series that are in my honorable mentions because they basically, there's something in there that pushes the show to the next level. So Terror of the Autons, most people would say Spearhead from Space, which was the first Pertwee episode and the first Color episode, well, that was certainly a major turning point. But a season later, Terror of the Autons introduced us to Joe Grant, to the Unit family.
Oh, the Units.
And the first episode with the Master, where
True.
Had a rival Time Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me was that was my number one in the honorable mentions. But I'm also going to throw Trial of a Time Lord in there, the first part of that, in a 14 episode season arc. What a great opener to have the Doctor being taken out of time and suddenly put on trial. I mean, as far as a hook goes, and as far as what's going on here and why am I watching this, that first episode definitely grabs you. And I throw Tomb of the Cybermen in the second Doctor's era, where the Cybermen return. This is the Doctor and Jamie, Victoria, at the height of their powers, battling Cybermen. And in a story that Stephen Moffat gave to Matt Smith on DVD and basically said, if you want to see a little something of classic Doctor Who, this is it. And one final one will be the 3 Doctors. On the 10th anniversary, talk about a season opener that would throw you a curveball. The 3rd Doctor is introduced to the 2nd Doctor and the 1st Doctor, and mayhem ensues. And anytime you have 3 actors on screen together, and this is the first of a long tradition of, it's an anniversary, we have to have a multi-Doctor story. So those are my honorable mentions, Shane.
Okay, and one just final thing before we finish. By the time we get this up, Gallifrey 1 will have already happened. So I wasn't going to ask you to talk about that, but I do understand that you have a new Doctor Who themed book out.
I do, yes. Well, you joined me in the first one, in the Villains of Doctor Who. This is now the Companions of Doctor Who, and it comes out at Gallifrey 1, and then will be available shortly after globally from the same publisher, from Fayetteville Mafia Press. I will be at Galley. I'll be doing some interviews there as well. And then in the summer, back to running L.I. Who, August 23rd, 24th, and 25th here on Long Island. Colin Baker, Nicola Bryant, Fraser Hines, Mark Strickson, amongst many guests, will be joining us here on the island.
And with, as far as books, just as we said with, we were talking about the Villains of Doctor Who, that like pre-sales really help. So as far as this new book, The Companions of Doctor Who, goes, if it is something you think I may get that, when you can pre-order it, rather than getting around to it late, because that actually helps as far as there being enough copies just to go around. Because what sometimes happens is, I'll wait till it comes out, and they're sold out, and they ain't going to print no more because there weren't enough pre-order. It's like the opening weekend, the box office opening weekend of a film, which I don't like that, but often that dictates whether a film is seen as a success or not.
And whether it sticks around for a little while or not.
Yeah. So if you're going to get that book, get it soon as. But otherwise, I assume we can end the pod there.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, same.
Okay, so if you have any thoughts or have your own top 5s as far as series openers, we can be emailed at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com, and you can tweet us at analysingdw, and we're also at analysingdw on Instagram. That's obviously all spelt with an S. thank you all for listening, and we will be back in a few weeks where we'll be previewing the new series of Doctor Who. Until next time. Our logo is courtesy of Scott Mattison. His work can be found at planetrisecreative.com and on Twitter at planetrise. Our theme tune is by Mike Mould. We can be reached at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com and on Twitter at analysingdw. Our logo is courtesy of Scott Matteson. His work can be found at planetrisecreative.com and on Twitter at planetrise. Our theme tune is by Mike Mould. We can be reached at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com and on Twitter at analysingdw.